Hello everyone, my name is Rosin, and welcome back to Talkin Tabletop. This is the series where I provide you with my random opinions and musings on tabletop role-playing games, both as a fun, creative hobby to do with your friends, as well as a creative medium. And we're going to be talking about that latter part of the equation a lot this video, because boy oh boy have there been some wild developments the past week or so. God, has it been a week yet? I don't even know. Time is a lost concept to me with how busy I've been, and I mean, there's been so much stuff coming out about this, but yeah, we're gonna talk about the recent OGL news and the broader concerning implications it has for tabletop role playing games as a medium, and also I'm going to I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm going to have a little bit of a stick up my ass towards the latter part of this video because I kind of have a I told you so attitude going into this whole thing. But we're going to take this slow. I guess one thing I do want to say before we get really into the whole OGL talk, and I'll try to make this short, I have not made a talking tabletop video for about a year, and that's just because I haven't had much tabletop stuff going on that I really felt the need to make a video for or really talk about or express that I couldn't do, outside of like a tweet or something. In terms of my tabletop experience the past year since I've made, one of these videos, I've just been playing a lot of Pathfinder with my friends. And actually, I just joined a second game of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. My friend Liz is running the Kingmaker module, and I'm very excited. Our first session starts tomorrow night, so I'm looking forward to that. But that's enough about what I've been up to. Let's talk about the whole OGL debacle that's been ongoing with tabletop role-playing games, and I'm going to assume you probably have heard at least bits and pieces of this if you are watching this video, but I will provide a quick recap if you have somehow stumbled your way into this little corner of the internet and you don't know what exactly is going on, which, I guess fair enough. Most people, I think, subscribe to me for video game stuff first, so maybe you clicked on this video and you're not familiar with tabletop role-playing games and you're like, what's an OGL? Which, completely fair. Admittedly, I was telling a Discord server I'm in about this. When this first broke, I was like, oh, this is going to be something that, like, the sphere of, like, people I follow on Twitter of, like, indie game devs and, like, tabletop role-playing game creators is going to be, like, really upset about, but, like, I didn't think that it would blow up to become, like, a mainstream news story that, like, big publications and shit are talking about, and, like, I don't know, like, I feel like a shit ton of YouTubers have made videos about this, even if they're not really, like, D&D people. Like, it's kind of wild. Like, there's a fantasy book author dude who I follow on here that even, like, talked about it, made, like, a video thing about it, and I'm just like, Jesus, like, this blew up in a way I was not expecting it to. But, I'm happy it did, because I'm gonna be honest, Wizards of the Coast has had this coming for a while. There are people like me, not just me, but many people within the tabletop role-playing game community that are not comfortable with the stranglehold that Wizards of the Coast, and in particular 5e, has on the medium. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that this video too. But for those of you unfamiliar, what is exactly going on here? So Dungeons & Dragons, as I'm sure you're aware, is the biggest, bar none, tabletop role-playing game system on the market, and has been for basically ever. It is what many people just assume you are playing when you talk about tabletop role-playing games, unfortunately. It is just synonymous almost with the act of playing a tabletop role-playing game, and just, role-playing with dice in general, despite the fact that this is a medium with many, many games and many different rule sets to explore and have fun with. So around the time that Dungeons & Dragons came out with the 3rd edition, the people who own D&D, Wizards of the Coast, created this thing called the OGL, the Open Gaming License, and effectively what this was a legal license that allowed creators to create their own unique works with the generic rules of the D&D system, and as long as they weren't using the proprietary property and IP of D&D like its settings, some of its more unique like creations and monsters like beholders and stuff like that, or like specific spell names and stuff like that were like, their copyright. It basically meant that you could publish your own homebrew content and sell it, distribute it, all that sort of thing, and knock into any legal foibles with Wizards of the Coast themselves. And the idea behind this, this is something I do want to highlight and talk about that I feel like is getting kind of lost in the shuffle. Many people talk about the OGL as something that was meant to be this 100% fully charitable thing that fostered like this open source sort of creative drive within the tabletop role-playing game scene. And while there's definitely like an element of that to the OGL, I do think it is important to also note in this discussion that the OGL was specifically created with the intention that, with D&D being the biggest system, opening up access to allow people to publish their own materials for it was another way for them to strengthen their grip on tabletop role-playing games as a market, and it was very successful for them. But I just feel the need to clarify that because the way that the internet, especially when news stories and things like this break out, it tends to flatten situations in ways that lose nuance and lose sight sometimes of the fact that situations are a little more gray. The OGL is a good thing, do not get me wrong, but I do think that it is important for us to note that it was something that was created from the get-go with the knowledge that it was likely benefiting D&D as an IP and was going to overall in the long term result in greater profit for Wizards of the Coast, because the more homebrew stuff you have out there for D&D that's easy to hold on to, the more stuff you have, the more labor and the output of that labor you have on the market for specifically your system, obviously that is going to benefit the game that all originates from, right? But, at the same time, this did open up avenues for people who had a, creative drive to very easily find an avenue to be creative and create their own stuff and sell it and have that be a, decent thing for them to do to not only make something fun and cool and unique, but also, find an audience that kind of had a built-in established familiarity with what you were creating, just because you're making D&D stuff. D&D people are gonna hook onto that and probably find some use out of that. They're already mostly familiar with the basics of what you're making, that sort of thing. And a lot of people benefited from this, and the community enjoyed it, creators enjoyed it, and obviously the company themselves enjoyed it. So this was a system that overall I shouldn't say system, this was a license that was just kind of left to linger and was just something that everyone had come familiar with and kind of taken for granted for about 2 decades now, almost 2 decades and a half. I guess 2 decades and a quarter. The OGL existed, and not only did it result in the creation of alternate modules and classes and different homebrew mechanics and elements and systems, but also entire new games like Pathfinder, which would go on to be a competitor to D&D after 4th edition came out and people really didn't mesh with it, which, I don't know. It's funny. As someone who's not really a D&D fan anymore, I feel like 4th edition is one of the editions I find more interesting. I know the common thing people always say about 4th edition is like, oh, that's not even a real tabletop role-playing game. That's like Final Fantasy Tactics. And I'm like, well, I like Final Fantasy Tactics a lot. I hate to break it to you. I've never played 4th edition, but I would love to give it a try someday. I don't know. That being said, there's still a lot of other systems I'd prioritize over it, and even stuff that's based on it, kind of like Icon and Lancer and 13th Age, I think I would even enjoy to play more than 4th edition. But there was a split where people were not happy with 4th edition, and Paizo created the game system Pathfinder, which is basically now D&D's biggest competitor in the space, using the rights afforded to them from the OGL, and then they went on in more recent times to create Pathfinder 2nd edition, which, if I recall, still uses the OGL even. Or maybe it doesn't. Actually, I'm not entirely aware. But this sort of thing has continued. There is a movement called the Old School Renaissance or Old School Revival movement, which is basically taking a look at the older editions of D&D and making new games and systems and modes of play based on that. And a lot of that stuff also relies on this license to even exist in the first place, because it's all based on very early editions of like D&D rules and stuff like that. So the OGL is the center of the tabletop role-playing game like marketplace in a very significant way. There are definitely a ton of games that exist outside of its reach and influence, which I want to highlight, because people are talking about the restriction of the OGL that seems to be happening as like the end of tabletop role-playing games as a whole. That is not the case. That is only the case if the only thing you care about is like that D20 D&D lineage of games, which, to be fair, for a lot of people, that is what tabletop role-playing games is. You know, they don't have any grasp of anything outside of that, which I think is unfortunate. But like for a lot of people, as soon as this OGL news came out, it's like, oh fuck, like the sky is falling. And I guess I haven't really said exactly what's going on with it, but Wizards of the Coast has been pushing in recently they've been gearing up for the release of what is essentially the next edition of D&D, called 1D&D. And their intended purpose seems to be like they want to get away from the edition numbering and just kind of make D&D like this living, regularly updated entity. For those of you familiar with like modern video games, it almost seems like they kind of want to make it more of a like live service game type of thing, or like its own ecosystem almost. And there have been a lot of pushes with 1D&D that people aren't super keen on, and as more and more of the OGL stuff has come out, there's also been leaks regarding other things that Wizards has planned for 1D&D that people aren't super happy with, especially when it comes to virtual tabletop usage and support. But what this all boils down to is that recently there was some news that the OGL would be updated after 20 years of it basically just existing and being fine and everyone who uses it being happy with it. And the new OGL leaked, and it very heavily restricts the freedom that people have creatively to make content, not only just for D&D systems, but based on the rules of D&D. Just effectively, you know, I could get into specifics, but the important thing to note is that a lot of the third-party publishing powerhouses that have been birthed from the OGL would have to dramatically change how they operate, if not just stop completely because of this, as well as affecting things like actual play podcasts and things like Critical Role, which have become, you know, massive and like a huge component of the tabletop RPG landscape. And really what this boils down to is that the OGL was updated, and it basically seemed like Wizards was saying, all right, you all had your fucking fun for 2 decades. You all started to make a bunch of money. We want a piece of the fucking pie. Hand it over. You're going to start, you know, you're going to have to run more things through us. We're going to be able to claim rights to the things you make because it's, you know, it all stems from us. So we're claiming rights to your creations, and we can use it if we want to, even if it's essentially your own creation, and we had like no say in its creation. Because you're using the OGL, you're basically signing your rights away to like create any original IP with it as well. And also, if you make over a certain amount of money or whatever, you're going to need to pay us royalties. And it just really closed it down, and really just went against what the OGL originally stood for. And again, there have been so many wonderful people who have like broken down the legality of this, you know, people with legal backgrounds, and as well just people offering their own comments, creators discussing what this would mean for them. I highly encourage you, if you are unfamiliar, to look up just on YouTube OGL, and I'm sure you will find a shit ton of content from people just discussing the implications of this change and what it means for them, or how this can impact things. And I guess with how Wizards of the Coast has been operating and what they seem to be trying to accomplish from the get-go as soon as they announced 1 D&D, I can't say I'm surprised. People like me have been saying forever that 5e has a stranglehold and is a horrific monopoly on the tabletop role-playing game space. And there are so many people that I feel like wanted to shut down that conversation. Even like going back last year, the last video I made in the series was me begging people basically to say, hey, there are more things out there than D&D. Please play other games other than D&D. I feel like it's better for the medium if people diversify their interest and their tables, and we support other games, other creators, and especially like indie creators and stuff like that too. It's good for your table. It teaches you different things about the medium and lets you experience different types of storytelling and different types of play. There are so many wonderful reasons, but I mean, even beyond that, just for the health of tabletop role-playing games, as something that, people, as a space that creators make stuff in, it is better if we, spend the time to explore its different avenues and support people who are making things other than the content that's out there for the big giant in the room that kind of sucks out all the oxygen from all the smaller creatures in the area. I suppose I'll word it that way, to use a tortured metaphor. But especially too with the way that Wizards has kind of been talking about 1D&D and their push towards digital play, and the virtual tabletop space. It really seemed to me like they want an iron grip on how people play D&D, on what people use D&D for, on what people make with it. So this really was not a surprise at all for me. And I guess this is, again, something that people have been talking about for a while, especially people who are more interested in the indie publishing side of things. While all of this was ongoing and people were talking about, like, hey, this is, now more than ever, this is a great time to switch up the system that you're playing. Cancel your D&D Beyond subscription. Frankly, I don't know why people use D&D Beyond. I don't know. There are so many better, cheaper alternative options for virtual tabletops, in my opinion, but whatever, I don't fucking know. A lot of people just default to using whatever the big official thing that's advertised is, I suppose, so I shouldn't be surprised, but I don't know. I never saw the appeal of D&D Beyond, even when I was, like, playing D&D more, I guess. But hey, no harm, no foul if you're watching this and, like, you use it and find it convenient or whatever. I just prefer other options in the space. Where was I? No, but while people were talking about, like, hey, this is a great time to switch systems to something else, I saw this wonderful tweet that just screen capped a Tumblr post from user Textaltale, and I'm going to pop it up on the screen right now. And I'm just going to read this verbatim. It says, imagine if Skyrim was the most popular game of all time by an order of magnitude, and people called video games Skyrims, and it cost $90 and took up half, and it cost $90 and took up half the average computer's hard drive. And then people would be on Nexus being like, hey, hi guys, check out my Farming Sim Skyrim mod. And it just had you killing Draugr, but on a farm. And people were like, yeah, I think that you just can't do farm simulation in video games. And if anyone brought up Stardew Valley, they'd be like, okay, well, first of all, it's presumptuous to assume I can afford a second video game or have space for it on my hard drive. And second of all, when I play Skyrim, I just run back and forth around the towns picking up all the cabbages for 7 hours on end. So I don't see why I need a whole game program to be about farming. I can play Skyrim the way I want to. Stop gatekeeping gaming. Anyways, that's what it's like. That's what it's like to like tabletop role-playing games other than Dungeons and Dragons. Bad read on my part. Sorry, I stuttered. Probably should have read that before, reading it for all of you again. But yeah, I love this post so much because it perfectly encapsulates what it's like trying to get people who are so entrenched in the D&D 5e system and mode of play to just try anything else. And I've it's been depressing to me because I've seen people say that, like, it's gatekeeping to recommend other systems or to say, like, hey, you should switch systems because they feel like they've invested so much. And I feel like the obvious metaphor for me here is that this is what happens when you put all of your eggs in one basket. This is what happens when you trust the monolith corporation that historically has not treated its workers particularly great, has struggled with important issues such as representation, and has frankly some of the people that they got to consult for D&D 5e are pretty bad reactionary type people. Like Wizards of the Coast has fucked up a lot in terms of like a lot of social areas that I feel like people don't give them enough crap for. And that's not to say that other big tabletop role-playing game companies are perfect either. Like, I know there's a lot of people that have been talking about how much they dislike Wizards of the Coast, and a lot of people are firing back like, hey, Paizo isn't perfect either, and obviously it's not. But I mean, there's also so many different, like, indie creators and, like, independent publishers for tabletop role-playing game stuff that just handle a lot of stuff better, and I wish got the support and the love that people gave to the big dragon game. That, frankly, I just don't think is a very good system in the first place, but hey, no one asked for my opinion. And I guess I've seen people who are very upset that people are reacting to this news by saying, oh, hey, switch to a different system, because they're like, hey, this is a fucked up situation, and like it's impacting my livelihood. And it's really douchey and belittling to say, oh, well, it's time to switch, or it's time to consider supporting other systems, or going your own way with this, rather than playing by the rules that have been outlined by Wizards of the Coast, and they are now obviously fucking people over on. And I guess, I don't know, I'm of many minds about this, but what I will say is that, yes, I do feel bad for the people that made a living off of the OGL especially, or people that use the OGL to make their own stuff, even if they didn't do it for a living. I mean, hey, I am a YouTube creator. I know what it's like to be beholden to a massive corporation that does not give a rat's ass about you, but profits off of you nonetheless. And even beyond that, I've been working office jobs for a while now, since I've been out of school. I know what it's like to have experience working for a crappy corporation that just does not care about you outside of the things you make for it, and just does not give you the time of day, and does not respect your independent own rights as a person, and will fuck you over at the drop of a hat, with little warning. Like, I totally get it, and I do feel bad for you. That being said, I feel worse for the people that have been making things for years and years and years now, who have not even had a single shred of the opportunity that 5e creators have, or OGL creators have, because they went out of the way to make something different, to go up against the giants, to make something that they knew maybe is not going to have the mainstream appeal and availability and visibility that it should, because 5e just, again, sucks up all of the air out of the room, time and time again. I genuinely think that it is time for people to discuss switching from 5e, not just because it is, Wizards of the Coast is fucking people over and fucking creators over, though obviously that is a good reason to. But also, I do think that we need to use this opportunity to discuss playing other systems and supporting smaller creators, and showing that tabletop role-playing, there is so much more to this space and this creative playing field than just the basic D20 dungeon crawling. And I encourage you, if you're looking for other systems, absolutely go, play things like Pathfinder 2e is a wonderful system. Worlds Without Number is a wonderful system. All those, different OSR games and stuff, if you want to play Icon, all of these games are great in their own unique way and offer something new for you to enjoy and play around with and experiment with. But I also encourage you to maybe try things that are completely outside of this realm. Try something like Blades in the Dark, that's a little more out there, that requires you to think differently, from moment to moment. And, it is going to take you a little bit of adjusting. But I feel like the more that we encourage tables to explore alternate systems and to buy things from other creators, we have to worry less about Wizards of the Coast completely, with a single bad decision, they completely upended the state of tabletop role-playing games online. We should not, no one group in this medium should have that much power and that much influence that they can just completely fuck over the landscape of online creators like they did. It's not right. And, there is never there is never any harm in, again, spreading your eggs to multiple different baskets, or diversifying your interests. Variety is the spice of life. There is so much to gain from just trying out different types of games and different systems that are just not within this lineage. And I really hope that this is a wake-up call for people, that tabletop role-playing games are fucking wonderful, and we can envision a better future for ourselves that is not chained down by the actions of Wizards of the Coast. So yeah, I'm just going to encourage you, go on DriveThruRPG or itch.io right now, and do me a favor and just look at a random fun system to play that seems a little bit smaller, and just go ahead, buy it, play it with your friends. Something that's not made by Wizards of the Coast, something that doesn't even necessarily use the OGL. Try something new out. See if you like it. I've seen so many people that are terrified of learning new systems, and I think that that's a fear that makes me sad, because what that tells me is that you do not believe in yourself and your table to learn how to do something new and give something new a try, and you absolutely do. I'm not gonna lie, I don't think 5e is necessarily a easy game to learn. I think that the way that book is, or those series of books are structured, and hey, that's another thing to fucking note here. A lot of tabletop RPGs don't require you to buy 3 fucking books to start playing, or at least, to start playing as they intended to, like D&D does. As that Skyrim Tumblr post thing kind of alluded to, a lot of tabletop RPGs are pretty cheap. They are also written with the knowledge that people are, reluctant to try out things other than D&D, and try to make it easy to pick up and learn, and make it, people write these things to make them easy and fun to learn, and intuitive to learn. And I want you to believe in yourself, to believe in your group of friends, and trust each other that you can take out the time and you can learn something new. And you don't need to worry about it being awkward. You don't need to, you can forgive yourself if you fuck up a rule, or you need to make an improv rule decision on the fly. I mean, hell, pretty much that's part of the course for just playing tabletop role-playing games in general, I find. You have it in you to learn something new and to try out something new. I think it's time that we stop assuming 5e is the default. I just do not think it is healthy for tabletop role-playing games if we want this hobby to continue to expand and grow. We have to leave the cradle. It's high time that we say fuck you to Wizards, and we promote other games and other systems. And hey, I guess after ranting like that, it's time to promote my own shit. I do have multiple tabletop role-playing game actual plays on the channel. I've been very slow at uploading updates for those. That's my bad. I'm going to try to more regularly update them, but I have we have a game of Blades in the Dark that I've been uploading. We have a game of Worlds Without Number that I've been uploading, and also a little special 2-parter we recorded around Halloween, playing the game system Prole, which is also just a wonderful little indie tabletop role-playing game. So yeah, maybe check those out and see what other sides of the tabletop role-playing game world has to offer. I'll link to those in the description below. Sorry if I sounded kind of rambly or like I'm kind of bumbling here at the end. I just have a lot of thoughts on my mind, and it's hard to kind of make them all concise and well phrased or worded, and I want to make sure that I am I want to make sure that I am conveying this as someone who comes from a place of caring and support. I don't want to just be the guy who shits on the big popular thing, but frankly, I feel like this time around it's warranted. But I say all of this, and I push for people to play other games and stop supporting Wizards of the Coast, not because I fucking hate 5th edition or anything like that. I just think that I love so many other systems, and I wish that they got the attention and love and care and praise that the big elephant in the room gets. And I feel like often dodges well-deserved criticism because of its popularity and its default state of being within the medium that I just do not find healthy or sustainable by any metric. So Oh boy, that was, oh wow, that went a lot longer than I thought it would. Yeah, that's about 30 minutes here. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I think this is my longest one of these yet. Actually, that's not true. I think the first episode was like an hour or something. So, whatever. It's always fun to talk about tabletop role playing game stuff. Let me know what your thoughts are on the OGL mess and all of that stuff. And I'm gonna try to upload these a little bit more often, just because tabletop role playing game stuff is always on my mind, and I don't know. It's just a fun thing to talk about. So, look forward to more of these hopefully soon. Have a good one. Bye.